Last week on AutoCheck, our test driver, Tony Morris, expressed a liking for front-wheel drive cars. Today we have one of the most potent front-wheel drive cars currently available on the market. This is the Chrysler Daytona Turbo. Tony, why are we seeing so many more turbocharged cars available all of a sudden?
Well, the main reason, Dave, is that we had a gas shortage, as you know, over the last few years, and the manufacturers were trying to get away from the big heavy engines like 454s, 427s, and Ford's 302. So Chrysler have jumped on a very early bandwagon in this type of car and brought in a small cc, like 2200cc turbo.
It's the same four-cylinder engine that you'll find in the basic Chrysler K car, but in the $13,000 Daytona, Chrysler has upped the performance to 140 horsepower by using fuel injection and a turbocharger.
The turbo boost is around about 8 pounds in this car. The car that we've been using as a guideline in AutoCheck is the Turbo Porsche, and it runs around about 10 pounds. The lower boost pressure in the turbo shows coming out of corners at the top end of the rev scale around about 65, 70 miles an hour when you've got your foot hard down. It seems to lag just that little bit. Admittedly, we're being very critical from a $13,000 car to a $70,000 car. So for your average motorist, the boost and the turbo would be very exciting.
With all the high-tech gear under the hood, it's important for the driver to be able to monitor what's going on easily and quickly.
The gauge package and the boost gauge, clock, radio, heater is all within reaching distance of the driver. The seating position is very comfortable. It has got a lumbar support, and it can be adjusted on your thighs and on your hips and on your back very easily while you're driving along.
There are back seats in the Daytona Turbo, but if you're over 4 feet tall, we wouldn't recommend them. The space is much better utilized when the seats are folded down, giving the car excellent cargo capacity under the hatch. Front-wheel drive cars are famous for their understeering characteristics, and the Chrysler Daytona is no exception.
You point the car and you put your foot in, and the car tends to understeer. In other words, it pushes. If you're going into a left-hand corner, it would pull over to the right. It's not uncommon in front-wheel drive, and it is quite manageable in this car. The tire and wheel package in the car is excellent. It's the Goodyear GT with the Chrysler Mag, which is a big asset in the handling department.
Another trait of front-wheel drive cars is that the transmission is a long way away from the gear shift. It's an area that usually causes the engineers problems, but the backroom boys at Chrysler seem to have dealt with the problem quite effectively.
The shifting mechanism does not have a good, solid feel about it. However, getting it into fifth gear and back down into third and second and back down into the bottom of the gearbox is no problem at all. I must praise them for that. In most front-wheel drives, when you're coming down the gearbox from third down into second, there's a normal crunch. This is very, very nicely done. The step from second up to third and third back to second is excellent.
However, Tony was not amused by Chrysler's decision to install a slightly beefed-up version of the K car's rear suspension and brakes in the Daytona Turbo.
The car is a turbo car, and I would personally like to see disc brakes all the way around. Where it really becomes evident is into tight corners from your high speed down into your low speed on hard braking. The tail of the car becomes very light, and it does actually feel as if you're going to run out of brakes. I'm sure this isn't the case, but I would be very critical of the braking system in the car. Putting a Porsche Turbo at a 10, I would give this car a 6.8.
Chrysler's economic recovery in recent years has been truly remarkable. They've done that by building some fine automobiles. However, as Tony's AutoCheck rating reflects, this car, the Daytona Turbo, needs a little more development work before it's going to successfully compete with the other cars in its class. Our thanks to Chrysler Canada for supplying us with the car, as always to Tony Morris of Circuit Tire for his expert evaluation, and to the Sports Car Club of BC for helping us with AutoCheck on Consumer Retorts. For Vancouver, a new approach to building American performance cars. The newest Mustang offers a 2.3-liter turbocharged, intercooled, fuel-injected engine generating an impressive 175 horsepower.
We discussed in a previous segment how low some of the car's boost pressures are. Well, in this car, with a 2.3-liter, it goes up as high as 16 pounds, which is really good. At the top end of the scale and the bottom end, the car responds very quickly to that high boost pressure. I I can promise you, this is a muscle car. It's not the Boss 302 as we knew it, but it is, in the modern day turbo cars, one of the best ones I've driven for sheer horsepower.
The suspension is McPherson strut at the front and a live axle at the rear with coil springs and adjustable Coney gas shocks all the way around. Massive anti-sway bars are stock both front and rear.
When we started the test, the car was understeering. In other words, the nose of the car was pushing. And quite easily, from the glove compartment, we took out a shock absorber adjuster and adjusted up the front shock absorbers, and the car handled very much nicer. In fact, it came into an oversteer situation, which is much nicer in these type of cars. The one thing I would be slightly critical on is the gearbox. The gearbox is excellent in first and second gear, nice close ratio gear, and then suddenly into third, it sort of dies on you. However, once you get out of second gear and try to find third, there's a long gate, a long distance between the second and third gate. As a result, the RPM, the revs, drop down, and it takes a little while for the boost pressure to come up.
Big disc brakes are also standard at all four corners. That's possible at least partly because of Ford's decision to go to 16-inch wheels and Goodyear NCT tires. The sticky radials provide excellent cornering power, but a word of caution. The tires use such a soft rubber compound that during our panic stop braking tests, we flat-spotted them.
We've been rather critical today of the brakes. However, we have really put the car through its paces. Being up at the racetrack, it encourages you to drive the car a lot faster, and we have been rather punishing in the car. However, it responded well, and only in very, very late braking did I feel a little bit uncertainty.
We frequently talk about putting cars through their paces at the track. Tonight we thought you might like to see just how hard Tony works to evaluate the car. It's a credit to the SVO that it didn't really complain about this treatment once during the test. By now you've probably gathered that Tony liked the SVO a lot, with one minor exception.
My main criticism on the car is the gearbox. It has got a Hurst shifter on it, and I think Ford have had better gearboxes in the past. However, I'm sure that a new car buyer in a Ford SVO would be a lot less critical on that side of the car than I would.
So how did Tony compare the SVO to the Porsche Turbo, costing 4 times as much?
We've praised this car a lot today. As you can well imagine, it is high in its class. I would praise it in its pricing, $20,000, in its handling, in the general characteristics of the car, on the look of the car. With a Porsche Turbo at a 10, I would give this car an 8.4, one of the higher ratings of any of the cars that we've tested so far.
And finally, it's my turn to try the new Mustang SVO. Our thanks to Ford of Canada and to Tony Morris of Circuit Tire Sales for their help with AutoCheck on Consumer Retorts. For Vancouver, I'm David Kincaid. Chevrolet's Camaro is a true survivor in the sporty car market. It's been around in one form or another since 1967. This car is a 1984 Z28 Ho, the hottest Camaro offered this year. The trend these days is to achieve good performance by using small displacement engines with turbochargers. But the engineers at Chevrolet have shunned that idea and have opted for a more traditional horsepower delivery system. It's called good old-fashioned cubic inches. The HO Z28 uses a 305 cubic inch V8 with a 4-barrel carburetor and dual exhausts. The result is a satisfying 200 horsepower. Our test driver, Tony Morris, talked about the drivability of the big V8.
This car has got a 305 cubic inch motor in it, and you really can tell that you've got the cubes back again. This is the HO motor, so it's got a little bit more poop than the standard car, but it's a very enjoyable car to drive. You take the car to its potential, and it's quite easily, I can assure you, to get it to 140 kilometers, which is the maximum of the speedometer. It's easy to brake. I think this is a big point with a car this size.
The good braking that Tony mentioned is accomplished with large ventilated discs at the front and finned aluminum drums at the rear. A disc brake rear end is an option on the HO version of the Camaro. A 5-speed manual transmission is standard on this model and performs admirably, allowing crisp shifts via the short throw linkage. The clutch, on the other hand, is not as sophisticated. While less leg strength is required than on earlier Camaros, the clutch still does not engage until near the top of its travel. It requires a bit of getting used to for smooth starts. However, the suspension is an area that is improved this year. Chevy still uses a traditional independent front, live rear axle system, but they've got it working much better than before.
Since 1981, they have changed the whole suspension setup in the Camaro. And the old cars used to give you a real rolling sensation. It wasn't a comfortable feeling. And in the new cars, they've obviously put much more high-tech technology into it, and they've improved it 100%. When you turn the steering wheel, the car points. It's a thing that Chevrolet lacked very badly in the past, was a positive steering feel. They've achieved this with the independent suspension they have in the front.
Tony Morris is well known in the racing fraternity for turning in some exciting performances in his race-prepared Camaro.
I've raced a similar car to this at Westwood for many years. Obviously, the cubic inches were the same, the horsepower is slightly different. However, the feeling of the car is very similar to our, say, $100,000 race car. This is a $20,000 automobile, and it has got a very positive feel about it. It feels safe at all speeds. It feels safe at high speeds. It steers perfectly. I guess I'm praising it a lot because I really do know the car well. Taking a Porsche Turbo at a 10, I would rate this car an 8.3.
If it sounds as though Tony Morris likes the Camaro Z28, it's not really too surprising. It's the kind of car he chooses to drive on the street. Our thanks to Duick on Marine for supplying us with the car, and to Tony Morris of Circuit Tire Sales for their help with AutoCheck on Consumer Retorts. For Vancouver, I'm David Kincaid.